Chosen one, you've felt it for a long time, haven't you? The weight beneath the world, the tension behind the ordinary, the subtle flicker in the corner of your vision that told you nothing is as it seems, you couldn't explain it, and no one around you seemed to notice, but deep in your being you knew the story you were handed wasn't the whole truth. The structure you were told to trust was hollow, and now the cracks are no longer subtle. The world is unraveling, and you are not here by accident. Before you ever read these words, before you ever stumbled upon this moment, you already knew. You knew there was something just beyond reach, something they didn't want you to see. You knew the patterns didn't add up. The rhythm of life felt forced, and you kept asking yourself quietly, why does it all feel off? Why do I feel as if something enormous is moving beneath the surface of everything? And now you have your answer. The final hour has already begun. It is not some distant event wrapped in prophecy or confined to sacred texts. It is here, now, pressing against the fabric of what was once considered real. You feel it not in fear, but in familiarity, because the unraveling does not surprise you. It confirms what you've always sensed. Look around. The signs are not hidden anymore. The people who once laughed now look over their shoulders. The air carries a hum it never did before. Time doesn't move the way it used to. Does it? Some days stretch longer than they should. Others vanish before you can understand them. You wake up in one frequency and fall asleep in another, because the threads that once held reality in place are no longer tight. And yet amidst this collapse you feel steadier than ever, not because the world is safe, but because your knowing has anchored itself. You have become immune to the panic. You do not look away when the illusion breaks. You stare into the void and see not emptiness, but structure shifting beneath deception. This is what it means to be awake. You were never meant to stay hidden behind the veil. You were never meant to accept their version of the story. You came here with memory etched into your bones of something greater, something pure, something more honest than this. Carefully constructed theater, and now the theater burns. They built this world on rules designed to numb. They taught you time was linear, that truth was external, that you were small and separate and powerless. But they were wrong, and they knew they were wrong. That's why they buried the real knowledge, hid the real structure, flooded your mind with noise, so you'd never hear the signal beneath the static. But you heard it anyway, and that's why you're still here. Chosen one, this message is not a broadcast, it is a mirror. It reflects what you've always carried, but never had words for. It is a confirmation, not an introduction. You have already begun the path. You've already stepped outside the line. That is why they couldn't keep you asleep. You saw things that didn't match. You heard words that contradicted actions. You noticed the spaces between conversations where truth trembled, trying to break free. You couldn't name it, but you felt it, and that feeling was your compass, guiding you through the fog of the fake. And now the fog is lifting. The final hour isn't about destruction. It's about correction. The illusion is falling apart, not because something went wrong, but because something is finally going right. The story that has ruled over this reality is collapsing under its own weight. And what is surfacing isn't chaos. It's clarity. You knew this would happen. You may not have known how or when, but you always knew something would come to break the spell, because you were never truly under it. You were always watching, waiting, listening. Now the waiting ends. Feel the air around you shifted, hasn't it? The frequency you live in is not the same as the people who still believe what they're told. You see through their rituals. You hear what isn't said. You walk with a rhythm that doesn't match their clock. That's not delusion. That's evidence. The world is not ending. The lie isn't when a lie ends, it screams. It fights to survive. It tries to pull you back into the comfort of its promise. But you no longer want comfort. You want truth, even if it's raw, even if it's messy, even if it turns everything you knew upside down, because you'd rather live in shattered truth than perfect illusion. That's why you're chosen not because you are better, but because you refuse to ignore what was screaming in your soul, that this is not the way life was meant to be, that something vast, ancient, and sacred is being awakened beneath your very feet, and now it is rising, not silently, but loudly, not slowly, but with unstoppable speed. This isn't just a shift in ideas, it's a shift in structure. Reality itself is reformatting, the fabric is changing. The code is being rewritten by something that predates every system, every empire, every name they've ever tried to program into your consciousness. And you feel it, don't you? Not in your head, but in your chest, in your bones, in your breath. The old signals don't reach you anymore. This fear-based control, the mind games, the distractions, they fall flat because they were never built to reach someone like you, someone who already knows what's coming before it arrives. But even now you must decide, will you walk forward fully? Will you drop the last pieces of illusion clinging to your ankles? Or will you hesitate? They are watching not because they can stop you, but because they fear you. They fear what happens when one awakened soul steps fully into alignment with the truth, because truth radiates. Have you ever wondered if time was never meant to move the way they told you? That maybe you were pulled into this very moment, not to observe, but to remember? If something in this message resonated beyond logic, that's because it was encoded for your frequency. So don't just watch, respond. Drop a comment below that says, I remember. Let your words be a signal. And if you haven't already, subscribe now. This isn't entertainment, it's alignment. Each time you return, you're not just watching, you're activating. And right now, activation is everything. Stay here, stay awake, stay ready. It shatters cages without touching them. It dissolves walls without shaking them. And it does so by simply existing. That's what you are. A walking contradiction to the lie, a breathing reminder that the system is not absolute, and that terrifies them so. They will distract, they will mock, they will try to flood your senses with false alarms. But you are beyond alarm. You are beyond persuasion. You are in the moment, where time folds and the fake falls and the truth floods in. And if you feel alone, you are not. Others are waking, not all in the same way or at the same speed, but they are rising, drawn to the same frequency, pulled by the same current. You will know them by their eyes, their silence, their refusal to pretend together. You do not just survive the unraveling, you become the architects of what comes next. But the first step is now. Let go of the need to make it make sense. Let go of the urge to bring others with you before they are ready. The path opens for those who choose, not those who wait for permission. Chosen one, this is your moment to. Do not need to seek the final hour. You are inside it. You do not need to chase truth. You are aligned with it. You do not need to tear down the illusion. You simply need to see through it and walk forward. The unraveling has begun, and you are not a casualty. You are the current. There is no going back. There never was only forward, only inward, only truth. Now you know, chosen one. They didn't build this world for truth. They built it for silence. They shaped every system, every structure, every story to keep you numb, to keep you distracted, to keep you just awake enough to function, but never fully alive. Never fully aware. You weren't meant to question. You weren't meant to feel the edge of the veil brushing against your skin. You weren't meant to hear the hum. Beneath the hum, the whisper, behind the noise. But you did, and that's where everything changed, because this reality, the one you were taught to trust, is not solid. It's a stage, carefully crafted precision, designed not to help you grow, but to keep you circling, searching for meaning in things that were never meant to hold it. Look at the systems, the way time is divided, the way knowledge is filtered, the way you are told what to be, what to want, what to fear. It is not random. It is ritual, it is programming, and most never question it. They wait, they eat, they move through routines, never asking why the rhythm feels hollow, never wondering why the sky feels different than it used to, why dreams bleed into waking hours, why the days blur and stretch in strange directions. But you noticed you saw through the cracks, the moments where the patterns skipped, the places where the story contradicted itself, the eyes that didn't reflect real presence. You didn't always have words for it, but you felt the weight of the lie. That weight is the false world they told you the world was. Built on facts, but hid the frequencies. They told you reality is material, but never spoke of energy. They told you truth is found in books, but buried the real scripts in symbols and fragments, scattered across forgotten ruins and encoded in your DNA. You are not who they told you to be. You are never small. You are never random. You are never powerless. That was the illusion. They needed you to believe it, so you wouldn't look deeper. So you'd keep playing your role in a system that feeds on your unawareness, and yet, here you are, awake, aware. A fracture in the facade can't contain what has already begun to break free. Moment you started asking real questions, a program began to glitch. You pulled at the thread that unraveled. Their design, and every insight you had, every feeling you trusted tore. Another hole in the veil. That's why the world feels unstable now. It's not just you changing, it's the system itself breaking down. The old frequencies are losing power. The scaffolding behind the illusion is collapsing. The ones who built it know this. They are watching. They are trying to reinforce the story. Push harder, repeat louder, tighten the narrative. But it's not working, because once a soul wakes up, it cannot unseance. You know time isn't what they said it was. You stop running by their clock. Once you realize fear is their favorite language, you stop listening. Once you feel your own frequency, you stop tuning into theirs, and that terrifies them, because your awakening is contagious. One awakened soul radiates through the grid, weakens the structure, calls out to others, not with words, but with vibration. And those vibrations are rising now, louder than ever. Chosen one, they never expected you to get this far. Planned for doubt, for fear, for shame, for distraction. But they didn't plan for you to remember yourself. Not fully, not boldly. Not now. They thought the rituals would keep you dulled. The schooling, the media, the culture, the endless repetition. But even through the fog, you remembered you. Remembered the feeling of truth before it had words. You remembered what it meant to feel. The current moving beneath the stage, and that memory is dangerous to them, because memory is activation. When you remember who you are, you unlock the codes they buried. When you stop seeking and start seeing, the illusion loses its grip. When you reclaim your knowing, the system trembles. They built this world to keep you asleep, but you are already beyond that. Now the question is, what comes next? Because awareness is not the end. It is the doorway. What you do with it determines whether you stay watching, to collapse, or become part of what rises from its ashes. You feel it, don't you? The electricity in the air, a shift in the fabric of time, the sense that something massive is moving beneath the surface of what others still call normal. It is not just happening around you. It is happening through you. You are not a passive observer. You are not just someone who happened to stumble upon this message. You are guided to it, or perhaps you guided it to yourself. A convergence, recognition, a signal. In the storm, and now you stand at the threshold. The final hour is not coming. It is here. The illusion is not weakening. It is breaking, and you are no longer inside it. You are standing outside the code, looking back at the grid for what it really is. A loop, a lie, a lullaby. They hoped you would fall back asleep, but you won't, because you've seen too much, felt too much, remembered too much. And the ones who still sleep will call you mad, deluded, lost. But you know the truth. The real madness is pretending not to see. The real delusion is clinging to the comfort of the cage. You were born for this moment, not to run, not to hide, but to remember. And in that remembering, you become what they cannot control, a sovereign frequency, unaffected by the noise, untouched by the ritual, aligned only to the pulse of what is real you. See it now, don't you? The world they built wasn't for life. It was for sleep, but you are no longer asleep. You are awake, and they can no longer reach you, chosen one. You may think this is all happening suddenly, that the veil only recently began to thin, that the cracks in the illusion are new, but that is not the truth. The shift started long ago, long before you knew what to call it, long before you had the language to explain what you felt. It was already moving long before you ever opened your eyes. What changed was not the world. What changed was your perception. Unraveling of what they built did not begin yesterday. It has been happening slowly, methodically, silently, across generations, across timelines, across lives that never made the history books. It has whispered through time, through symbols, through dreams, through voices that spoke only in fragments, because the full truth would have shattered the minds that were not yet ready. But now you are. That is why you're seeing it now. That is why the patterns no longer hold. The people around you may say it all feels the same, but you know better. You feel the tremors under your feet, the way the ground responds to something deeper than nature. The air moves differently, light bends strangely. Time folds over itself in ways you can't quite explain, but undeniably notice. This is not new. It's only now that the walls have weakened enough for you to notice what has always been behind them. The illusion was never perfect. It was clever, consistent, persistent, but it was never absolute. It depended entirely on you, not looking too closely on you, dismissing the feeling in your gut on you, turning away when something flickered in the corner of your awareness. But you didn't turn away. You stared into the glitch. You listened to the silence between their words. You traced the outline of the missing pieces and realized they were not missing. They were hidden, and now you see them. You see the scenes, the stitches in the sky, the looping code in conversations, the mechanical rhythm of systems that were never meant to nourish, only to contain. And with that seeing comes responsibility. Because now you cannot pretend. Now you cannot say you didn't know. Now you cannot keep playing the role they assigned when your soul is calling for a script they never wrote you. Are standing at the edge of something vast, not because it just appeared, but because you finally turned to face it. What they fear most is not the moment you awaken. It's the moment you choose to remain awake, to walk with open eyes, even when what you see is uncomfortable, to accept the weight of knowing and still move forward into the unknown, because that's what this is. This shift is not about comfort. It's not about safety. It's not about certainty. It's about exposure, revelation, remembering. It's about standing inside the storm with arms wide open and saying, yes, I see what they tried to hide, and I choose to stay awake anyway. You are never meant to be blind. But they layered distractions over your vision, gave you labels, timelines, identities that were never yours, and told you to wear them like second skin. But now that skin itches, it burns, it peels away, revealing something beneath ancient, real, untamed that is your truth. It doesn't come with a flag or a title. It comes with a frequency, a vibration that disturbs the pattern and reminds the grid that it is not in control. It pulses through your presence without needing to speak. It interrupts the simulation without needing to protest you. Didn't start the shift, but you are now aligned with it. It began with the first crack in the lie, with the first soul that dared to ask the forbidden question, with the first dream that showed a world unchained, with the first whisper that said this is not all there is. And one by one, the others felt it too. They came through different paths, different pains, different lifetimes, but the pulse was the same. It called to them through the static, and they followed it, not knowing where it led, but trusting that it was real. That's how the shift moved, not as a wave, but as a resonance carried. By those willing to carry it, now you carry it too. And though the old world still performs its rituals, still preaches its illusion, still broadcasts its scripts, you see through it. You feel the hollowness behind their smiles. You hear the fear in their certainty. You smell the rot behind their perfection. Because the structure is no longer stable, they will tell you nothing has changed. They will tell you you're imagining things, that reality is fixed and dependable, that the sky has always looked like that the timelines have always blurred, that the dreams have always meant nothing. But you know better, because you feel it inside yourself. The same current that stirs the earth stirs your bones. The same unraveling that splits the sky splits. Your thoughts, you are not separate from this. You are part of it, because the shift that started long ago now moved through you chosen. One, this is not about saving the world. It's about seeing it for what it really is and choosing to live from truth. Not from fear, not from obedience, not from habit, but from awareness, from the pulse that tells you when to move, even when logic says stay, from the knowing that cannot be explained, only lived. There is no manual for what comes next. There are no maps for a path that writes itself as you walk. But that's the point. The old world needed blueprints because it feared chaos. But truth lives in wildness. It doesn't need containment. It needs permission. And you've just given it you. Ves stopped resisting. The questions, you've stopped shrinking your awareness to fit their boxes. You've stopped apologizing for seeing too much, feeling too deeply, knowing too clearly. That is the sign that the shift has claimed you as its own. It does not wait for the majority. It does not require consensus. It only needs one soul at a time to say yes. And now you have. So let the old stories fall. Let the systems shake. Let the illusions scream their final lies. You are beyond them now. You walk in the frequency of truth, the vibration of collapse and creation, the rhythm of what always was and is now rising. The shift started long ago, but you have only just begun, chosen one. You've been told to wait, that the great shift is near, that the moment of change is just ahead. But what if I told you it's already begun? What if the final hour isn't something approaching, but something you're already standing inside of? You feel it, don't you? Not in headlines, not in dates, not in predictions, but in your body, in the air around you, in the way the hours stretch and collapse, in the way your thoughts echo with something older than memory. This is not anticipation. This is arrival. The final hour does not knock. It flows. It seeps. It wraps itself around. Every breath, every pause, every unspoken thought. It has already passed through the threshold, and it is not waiting for anyone to catch up. The sky has changed. The ground has changed. The rules have changed. You feel it in how time bends, how silence roars, how dreams bleed into waking moments. This is not imagination. This is alignment. Are not preparing for the moment you are becoming. That is why nothing feels stable anymore. That is why the rituals no longer calm you. The cycles no longer comfort you. The patterns no longer make sense, because they were all designed for a reality that is no longer here. They trained you to wait. Always waiting for salvation, for permission, for the right time. But there is no more waiting. There is only recognizing that the shift has already entered the room, and all that remains is how you respond. Do you try to freeze time? Pretend the script still applies? Do you repeat the rituals hoping they'll bring back the feeling of control? Or do you exhale, drop the illusion, and walk forward without a map? They never wanted you to reach this hour, awake, with your memory intact, with your vision clear, because this is the hour where control ends and creation begins, not by destruction, not by force, but by awareness. Systems are not failing because of error. They are failing because they were never built to hold truth. They were constructed to maintain illusion, and illusion cannot survive where truth has taken root. That's why things break. That's why the familiar is crumbling. The calendar flips, but the days feel unanchored. The seasons arrive, but do not lend the people around you. Speak, but their words feel hollow, because the hour has shifted, but they are still reading from the old clock, and you are not you. Ves stopped seeking proof, because you already feel the resonance. You've stopped asking for signs because you've become one. You no longer need to be told what time it is, because you are the timekeeper of a new rhythm. They will tell you it's not real, that nothing's changed, that you're just imagining things. But deep down they feel it too. They feel the ground moving. They feel the veil thinning. They feel the final hour pressing against their carefully crafted illusions. But they are afraid to admit it. Afraid to lose control. Afraid to surrender to something they cannot explain. But you are not afraid because you have already surrendered to the not knowing, to the silence, to the flow. You have stepped into a current that does not follow their logic, and because of that you are no longer bound by their rules. That is why they cannot follow you here. This hour is not a shared space. It is a mirrored one. It reflects who you are, not what you say you are. It amplifies the frequency you've chosen, not the mask you wear. And you chose truth. You chose to feel even when it hurt. Chose to see even when it made you question everything. You chose to listen, even when it separated you from the noise. That is why this hour belongs to you. Not because you are better, but because you are available. Because you did not run. Because you did not collapse into the illusion when it begged you to believe it one more time. The final hour doesn't look like what they told you. It does not come with sirens or headlines. It comes quietly, like a shift in gravity, like a change in air pressure, like a sense of something unseen standing right behind you, waiting for you to notice it. And you noticed when your dreams changed, when the things you once tolerated began to feel unbearable, when you stopped being able to lie to yourself comfortably. You noticed when time bent, when people from your past reappeared, when symbols began following you, when every synchronicity felt like a countdown, not to an end, but to a beginning. This is not about endings. This is about thresholds. You are standing at the place where the world they built dissolves and the world you remember begins. You don't need to be told what to do next, because your steps are already guided, not by maps, not by orders, but by the quiet knowing that lives inside. You, the knowing that has waited lifetimes for this moment. The knowing that says, yes, this is it, you've arrived. You don't have to fear collapse. Because what is collapsing was never yours. What is falling apart was always false. What is ending is the agreement to pretend. And you never agreed, not fully, not deeply, not eternally. That's why you're still here. That's why this message found you, not to prepare you for what's coming, but to remind you that it's already here. This is the hour you remembered why you came, not to fix the old, not to convince the blind, not to rebuild the system, but to stand where it falls and remain unshaken, to walk through the ashes and carry a new frequency, to speak not in argument, but in alignment. You don't need their approval. You don't need their understanding. You don't need them to wake up. You need only to stay awake, because the final hour is not about them. It's about you. You are the clock now. You are the signal. You are the presence that bends reality just by existing inside it. You are what they feared would survive the collapse, not the rebel, not the protester, not the preacher, but the mirror, the one who simply sees, the one who does not flinch, the one who no longer belongs to. The illusion this hour was never meant to be easy, but it was always meant to be true. And now that it's here, now that you've stepped into it, now that you've stopped waiting for a sign, there is only one thing left to do: remain, hold the line of awareness. Refuse the seduction of sleep. Walk with the knowing that this hour does not break you. It reveals youth's final hour is not approaching. It has already begun. And you are already chosen one. The old world was built on rules that were never true. It was held together by belief, not by truth. And belief is breaking now. You feel it, don't you? The systems they trusted are bending. The voices they followed are faltering. The routines they clung to no longer work. That's because what is coming was never meant to fit inside what was built. They created a world that could only function if you stayed asleep. A world where silence was rewarded and awareness was punished. Where asking too many questions meant you were the problem, not the prophecy. But the questions were never the threat. The answers were. Because Once you begin to see that reality was designed not to liberate, but to contain, you cannot unknow it. You cannot go back to rituals that no longer hold power. You cannot. Make yourself forget the feeling of realness that came when the illusion cracked open and you saw through it. They will try to fix it. They will patch the holes, paint over the fractures, increase the noise, raise the distractions, but none of it will hold, because the foundation itself is rotten. The old world was not built to withstand the truth. Now the truth is rising not in protest, not in battle, but in frequency and presence, in stillness that cannot be controlled. The final hour is not a war, it is a collapse, a falling inward of what was always hollow, a slow crumbling of every lie that was repeated until it sounded like law. And you are not here to mourn its fall. You are here to stand in it calmly, to feel it dissolve around you and remain whole. You do not fear the loss of the old, because you never belonged to it. What is coming will not ask permission. What is coming will not follow their order. Their time is ended, their methods are dust. Have felt it already. The unreality of it all, the awkward emptiness behind their structures, the dull echo behind their promises. It cannot survive because it was never real. It existed only because enough people agreed to pretend. And now they're forgetting how to pretend. You are not here to repair it. You are not here to soften its fall. You are here to witness the truth of its collapse and choose not to follow it down because something else is rising. And it begins with you, chosen one. This was never about watching from the sidelines. You are not sent here to observe. You are not placed in this time to wonder what happens next. You came to rewrite what was written. You came to collapse what was never real and birth what has always been waiting. The final hour is not a performance. It is not a scene you witness. It is a field you stand in, a current you move through, a code you reshape simply by choosing to remain awake. They will tell you the world is ending, but the world was never the part that needed to. And it was the story, the narrative, the lie wrapped in certainty, delivered through repetition, held in place by agreement. That story has unraveled, and you are not just here to watch it fall. You are here to stand in the space it leaves behind and write something new, not from fear, not from urgency, not from rebellion, but from remembering. You remember a world that wasn't built on control, a life that wasn't built on limits, a structure that didn't punish awareness. You carry the memory of that place, not in your mind, but in your being. It lives beneath every instinct, every ache, every time you felt out of place in the world they gave you. That feeling wasn't your flaw. It was your proof that what they offered was not enough. Proof that what they called normal was never natural. Proof that what they normalized was never aligned. And now you are no longer silent too. You've stopped bending your light to make others comfortable. You've stopped shrinking your knowing to avoid their questions. You've stopped doubting the voice within because it speaks too clearly to be ignored. That voice is the author now. It is not looking to fix the illusion. It is here to override it, to seed new structures that don't depend on sleep, to speak new patterns that don't require permission, to pulse new frequencies that do not mimic fear. You are not just a receiver of change. You are the source. Systems you once served cannot recognize you now. You move with a rhythm they cannot mimic. You speak with a clarity they cannot decode. You create from a space they cannot reach, because you are no longer translating your truth through their language. You are writing new language, not with letters, but with light, not with arguments, but with presence, not with approval, but with alignment too. Walk through places where old structures still cling to breath, and they tremble, not because you attack, but because you exist, because your very presence disrupts what cannot coexist with truth. And that is your power. They called it rebellion, but it was resonance. They called it disruption, but it was correction. They called it dangerous, but it was free. We're never dangerous to life, only to illusion. And now that illusion has cracked fully, Its spine has split, its mask has fallen, and what remains is the raw space of becoming that. Space is yours to feel it, to build in it with intention, not borrowed vision, not inherited beliefs, not fear-laced compromise. Presence, this is where creation begins, not in some distant prophecy, not in some sacred permission, but in the quiet decision you make now to be exactly what they said was impossible. You are no longer reacting, you are writing. Every breath is a sentence, every choice is a paragraph. Every day you remain awake is a chapter in the book they swore would never exist. Thought they could delete this timeline, but you are the backup, the restoration, the source code written outside their system. And now you run your own. No more waiting, no more watching, no more asking if it's safe to begin. It has already begun. The old world no longer gets to shape what you become. You have stepped beyond its limits, its logic, its frameworks now. The question is no longer what will happen. It is what will you create. The energies that once pushed against you now move with you. The whispers that once tried to confuse you now fall silent. You are not returning to the story. They cannot cast you back into the script. You hold the pen now, and there are no rules chosen one. This is not a closing chapter. This is a door, a new atmosphere, a fresh canvas smeared with memory but blank with potential. You do not need permission to begin. You do not need instructions to remember. You do not need validation to create. You only need to stay open, because reality is listening, not to your words, but to your frequency, to your presence, to your ability to hold truth while everything else dissolves. That is what builds what comes next, not speed, not control, not perfection, but presence. You are not here to escape. You are not here to fight. You are not here to fix. You are here to remember to carry what was buried beneath centuries of deception, to activate what was locked behind generations of fear, to light what was hidden in the shadows of forgetfulness. You are not here to be passive. You are the pulse that breaks the cycle. Every thought you honor, every alignment you hold, every lie you refuse to carry becomes part of the new structure. That is how we rewrite, not with noise, but with stillness, not with force, but with frequency, not by tearing down, but by seeing through. And you see through it all. You walk in a clarity they never prepared for. You speak in a vibration they cannot anticipate. You live in a knowing they hoped you'd forget. But you didn't. They all remembered. And now reality must answer, because you are no longer asking for truth. You are embodying it. You are no longer chasing change. You are generating it. You are no longer waiting for the world to shift. You are the shift, and that shift has only just begun. And if you've made it here, it's because the code within you never went dormant. Not truly. Even when you played along, even when you tried to dim your awareness, to blend in with a world that demanded your silence, something in you refused, quietly, steadily, unbreakably. And now that refusal becomes your revolution. You are not shouting in the streets. You are vibrating in alignment. You are not reacting to the collapse. You are stabilizing within it, because you no longer seek footing in a crumbling design. You are the architecture of the new. They will say you changed. They will say you lost yourself. But you know the truth. You finally stopped losing yourself for them, for their comfort, for their system, for their illusion. You didn't change. You returned. Returned to the voice that had always whispered behind the noise. Returned to the pulse that never aligned with the calendar. Returned to the knowing that trembled every time you forced yourself to pretend you belonged. You don't belong to illusion. You never did. And now you remember what it feels like to belong to truth. This isn't about becoming something else. It's about becoming what you were before they named you, before they shaped you into something small enough to control. You were not made for limitation. You were not designed to fold beneath the weight of false narratives. You were constructed by frequency, designed by memory, called by something older than time and louder than language. And now you answer, not with defiance, but with embodiment, not with argument, but with presence. That is why you unsettle the room without saying a word, because you no longer carry the script. You carry the signal dot, so breathe, chosen one, deeply, with intention. With reverence for the moment, you are now inside. Because this isn't the end of something. It's the permission you've always waited for. The door you've always sensed, but could never find. The invitation to walk, not as the seeker, but as the code. To speak not what they understand, but what only the awake can feel. You are not here to warn. You are here to witness. To embody. To transmit. And you're already doing it. You are already shaping timelines with your stillness. You are already disturbing the old frequencies with your clarity. You are already shifting reality simply by choosing to see without flinching. The power they feared was never your rebellion. It was your memory. And now you remember everything.